Hello and welcome on Watches TV, and I know we published recently a prime time, but following some very recent news and a very interesting comment made by one of our patrons on our Patreon platform, well, I thought it would be a good idea to expand on the matter, but we will also come back on some other business news in this troubled environment. And quickly wanted to introduce the cool partnership with UK-based artist Lee Yen Rapati, the man behind a very creative Instagram account that maybe some of you guys know, called 1 Hour Watch, where he reinterprets some watchmaking icons, bringing a touch of much needed poetry. And in each prime time to come, well, we will share with you at least 1 or 2 designs that you will be able to purchase on our website, the link below. And today, well, we have these 2 designs available for you. So without any further ado, welcome on edition number 61 of Primetime, and the big news was the filing for bankruptcy of HYT, the fluidic horologist as they like to call themselves. And beyond HYT, well, what does it mean? How can it be interpreted, and what are the general impacts on the general watchmaking scene, in particularly on the independent scene? Well, you guys know that on Watches TV we do have a little crush for these independents, and one can quite easily say that today's watchmaking creativity and audacity comes from the independents. Creativity both in terms of some daring design options, but also on the technical side with also some pretty bold and ambitious developments, and HYT was for sure a perfect example of this. A bit less than 10 years ago, they introduced something which, by definition, you would never like to see in a watch, meaning liquids, but nevertheless, they managed to pull this off with some very high-tech and super precise capillary systems, some kind of glass tubes, developed by a team of rather brainy people, because we're indeed talking hardcore science behind this. So from the start, you had 2 companies, HYT, the watch brand, and Preciflex, the company which developed this capillary technology, and the result meant that for the first time liquids would be used to indicate time inside a wristwatch. And I say wristwatch because if you go back before the existence of mechanical watchmaking, well, clepsydras or water clocks are the true ancestors of time measuring devices going back to more than 3,000 years. Well, anyhow, the principle used by HYT was more or less the same, but in a closed system with 2 different colored liquids mechanically pushed from one container to the other, and where they met, this showed the actual hour. And for more precision and legibility, the minutes were showed traditionally with a regular hand. Okay, I won't come back on the entire story and all the models developed, but the first one was the H1, and when it was introduced, it got so much attention. It was seriously quite crazy. I mean, they even made it on the cover of Wired magazine. Told you, I mean, that's pretty insane coverage. And unfortunately, they didn't really manage to transform this hype into a massive commercial success, because there was a serious gap between this generated hype and the proper functioning of the first timepieces. So if the announcement of this breakthrough could have been followed by the delivery of working timepieces, well, I can seriously promise you that it would have been a totally different ball game. But it just showed that indeed this was a complicated development, and you know the saying, I mean, to be right too soon is to be wrong. Well, there's a bit of that here. Well, big hype, big expectation, and then unfortunately it was extremely complicated to reverse things. I mean, initial price positioning was also much more aggressive for such a product, around 40,000 Swiss francs. But this, of course, didn't last too long, as they soon realized that it would cost them quite a chunk more to produce the watches and finalize its development. But they had great plans. I mean, even rapidly coming with a tourbillon version and working with the serious and very capable team of APRP for the H2 looked totally cool, but again quite complicated and of course priced much higher. A few years back, I mean, big financial investments had been made to solidify the brand, expand the product offering, and even develop a more reasonably priced version around the 20K mark. But now these ambitions have been put aside. And regarding the existing products, I personally think that it's when they came with the H0 that they had really found their code. I mean, taking the advantages of the technology in a very distinct case design, really putting forward what had previously been done in a very coherent and versatile product, allowing many interesting variations, colors, gems, skull-shaped capillaries, etc. Okay, but as I said, the goal of today's video is not to come back on all these models, but more importantly on the significance and meaning of this just announced bankruptcy. So an issue I often hear about buying a watch from an independent brand is precisely the sustainability of the company when you're about to drop 100K on a timepiece. What happens if the brand goes bust? I mean, who will take care of it afterwards if I have a little problem? Who will be able to service it? And these are all very legitimate questions. And the problem with a company like HYT going bust is that it really highlights this issue very explicitly. Okay, something additional to take into consideration is to differentiate between products that are using traditional mechanical watchmaking craft and those using technological breakthroughs. For instance, MB&F watches may seem totally crazy, and they are, but ultimately they use traditional mechanical methods, meaning that more or less any well-trained watchmaker could be able to take care of it. I mean, naturally, you will have many special components that have been specifically developed and manufactured for such watches, requiring special know-how to assemble, fine-tune. But worst case, these could be reproduced. I'm not saying this would be easy, but by definition, it would be possible. So think of the crazy and amazing deep space resonance watch that we covered recently by Vianney Alter. It is a breakthrough too, but it uses traditional manufacturing methods, traditional materials used, and again, on paper, parts could be made in the future. And for those who haven't yet seen this video, well, I clearly invite you to do so. Fascinating stuff. But coming back to the subject, I think there is a good parallel to be made with cars. I mean, you have the analog versions, cars that are fully mechanical. Think of your old school Mustang. And then appears electronics, and today it's simply impossible to have your car serviced if you don't go to the original dealer. I mean, think of Tesla. Okay, I mean, having an oil change will still be possible. Okay, maybe not with a Tesla, but you get the point. Well, when there's too much technology and or specificities involved, you do de facto put yourself in a position of higher dependency to this brand, and this should be an educated risk. Okay, I totally get that for some people buying such a watch probably doesn't mean exactly the same as for some of us mere mortals, but indeed, when you're a billionaire, buying a 100K timepiece is like me buying some chewing gum. And for a brand like HYT, well, I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of its end customer bought these watches because they were cool and different, kind of a nice talking piece among your friends. And this purchase didn't put them in jeopardy. I mean, they were not hesitating between the education of their children, buying the house of their dreams, and having just a bit of fun with a fun object. So all this needs to be relativized slightly and put in perspective, but it doesn't change the fundamental question of sustainability. When Patek and Rolex use silicon in their movement, well, you know that they will produce enough spare parts to service your watch for years and years. I mean, risk is very limited. But when a small brand uses such technology, well, you have to seriously think about it, apart if you're in the category of being rich enough to simply have fun. But even for some very rich people, I mean, they also care about this sustainability issue as a principle. So yes, I mentioned an educated choice and risk, and this is a very personal thing because for those for instance, who bought some cool watches from brands that have disappeared, such as Cabestan, MCT, Romain Jérôme, de Grisogono, and hopefully the list won't grow too much, well, you're for sure in a rather complicated situation, and this will naturally impact the resale potential of your timepiece. I mean, who will want to buy your Cabestan knowing that despite the coolness of the watch, well, you might get stuck with it and no one will be able to take care of it in the future. Okay, in the case of HYT, and as mentioned, the watchmaking part of their activity represented one side, and Preciflex, the company behind capillary development, will continue to exist, since this can be used, for instance, for medical application, and there are still a lot to be done on that field, and therefore they did say that they will continue to provide servicing for those who purchased these HYT watches. But in the case of Cabestan, well, that's a totally different story. So maybe somewhere, someone would be interested to take over HYT, but this for sure would require some pretty deep pockets with the risk that come along. So indeed, when you're going down the independent route, it it is worthwhile taking into consideration the solidity of the brand you're purchasing from, its track record since when it exists, and indeed take an educated decision when buying this. But the problem I see today is that the demise of these disappearing brands do hurt the entire independent watchmaking scene, and therefore it is very important not to put everyone in the same basket, and one does need to do a bit of homework when you buy such timepieces. I mean, the level of trust needs to be really high for you to feel comfortable when you're putting 50 or 100K on the table, or to be so financially comfortable for you that you don't care too much about it. But then that's your choice, okay? So I must say that I am very highly interested in knowing what are your opinions about this, and can't wait to read some of your comments about it. Again, for me, it doesn't take anything away from the very respected and needed audacity such newcomers are bringing to watchmaking. I mean, it's fresh and inspiring, but there is a but, and people should be aware about it. Okay, next topic with a very quick recap on some other business news, and as previously anticipated, Richard Mille has now been formally announced as Ferrari's partner replacing Hublot. And for the little story, it seems that this has really annoyed personally Mr. Bernard Arnault, LVMH chairman, and LVMH being owner of Hublot, to the point that he expressed it quite vigorously to the brand's managing team, and I doubt this must have been a very pleasant moment for them. And the main concern actually was how could they let go such a powerful and prestigious partnership, especially when it had been running for almost 10 years. Well, this will now be Richard Mille's mission, and I can totally trust them to leverage this cleverly and efficiently, both in terms of marketing and product development. I mean, I just can't wait to see this. And still concerning a car partnership, and Formula One in particular, well, this one was a bit more of a surprise, but Girard-Perregaux has officialized its partnership with Aston Martin. I mean, we know that the brand is struggling and has been struggling for a little while, despite being such a legitimate brand. So this was indeed quite a surprise, because we know that the price tag of such deals require quite a lot of funds, and I hope it's not an all-in option for them, but for sure quite a gamble. And personally, well, I do like GP a lot. Okay, in terms of new watches, well, we just have to wait a little bit, as the digital edition of Watches and Wonders will take place between the 7th and 13th of April, and we should see a lot of things. I'm just a bit scared that so many announcements made at the same time will dilute things, and we already know that quite a few brands will actually share some news prior to these dates, precisely to avoid this. I mean, nevertheless, can't wait to see some new things, and since we're in Geneva, well, we'll do our very best to see some of them in the flesh and bring this to you instead of only relying on corporate communication messages. Okay, well, this is soon it for this short prime time. Really looking forward hearing your comments, whether here on YouTube or on our website. And also please remember that we have new t-shirts available with these really cool and dreamy scenes. But more to come soon, and don't hesitate to check Lee's Instagram, The Hour Watch. Alright, this is it. Thanks for your support and interaction. See you real soon, and a massive Viva Watchmaking to all of you. There is still hope.